A man changes his Wi-Fi password, and within minutes, his neighbor dials 911. What seems like a simple misunderstanding quickly spirals into something far darker. But when the police arrive at Darius Coleman's doorstep, they uncover a chilling truth that neither he nor anyone else in the quiet neighborhood could have anticipated. Darius wasn't one for drama or attention. He lived a low-key life in Crestwood, Missouri, working from home, keeping his yard tidy, and avoiding small talk with neighbors unless absolutely necessary. For years, this arrangement worked perfectly. People left him alone, just how he liked it. That is, until one seemingly ordinary decision thrust him into an unexpected spotlight. It all began on a Thursday afternoon after a long morning of work. Darius decided to take a break by testing his internet speed. Lately, his connection had been frustratingly slow, buffering during video calls, lagging while streaming music. At first, he chalked it up to his service provider being unreliable. But as he dug deeper into his router settings, something caught his eye, an unfamiliar device connected to his network. Its name wasn't random numbers or letters, it read Crestwood IO1. That struck him as odd. Darius lived alone and only used his Wi-Fi for his phone, laptop, and TV. He certainly hadn't shared his password with anyone. So who was using his internet? Frustrated, he booted the unknown device off the network and reset his Wi-Fi credentials. To get a stronger signal, he stepped outside, leaning against the side of his house as he typed in the new password. From her kitchen window, Melanie Foster watched him intently. She noticed Darius standing in his driveway, staring at his phone, fingers moving rapidly across the screen. Suspicion bubbled inside her. Melanie had never trusted him, not because of anything specific, but because he kept to himself. No block parties, no casual chats over the fence. And now here he was, acting strangely outside. Her mind raced to conclusions. Hacking, cybercrime, whatever it was, she felt certain it wasn't innocent. Without hesitation, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Yes, I need to report something suspicious," Melanie said urgently. "My neighbor, he's outside doing something with his phone. It looks off. Can you send someone?" The dispatcher asked questions, but Melanie couldn't provide much detail. All she knew was that Darius was up to something. Within minutes, sirens echoed through the otherwise peaceful neighborhood. Unaware of the storm brewing around him, Darius finished updating his Wi-Fi password just as the squad car pulled up. Two officers emerged, one tall and imposing, Detective Louis Navarro, and the other smaller but commanding, Officer Bell Carter. As they approached, Navarro's hand hovered near his belt, a subtle warning. "Sir," Navarro called out, voice steady, "we got a call about some suspicious activity. Care to explain what you're doing?" Darius frowned, glancing between the officers. "Suspicious activity," he gestured toward his house. "I'm changing my Wi-Fi password." His tone carried confusion, but he remained calm, knowing how quickly situations like this could escalate. Before Navarro could respond, a shrill voice interrupted. "He's lying." Darius turned to see Melanie Foster standing on her porch, arms crossed, glaring at him like she'd caught him red-handed. A man steps outside to reset his Wi-Fi password, only for his neighbor to call 911 on him. What starts as a petty misunderstanding quickly spirals into something far more sinister when the police arrive and uncover a chilling truth lurking in plain sight. But what they discover next will leave everyone questioning who's really being watched, and why. Darius stood in his driveway, phone in hand, trying to explain himself to the officers while Melanie Foster glared at him from her porch. "He's always outside doing something," she insisted, her voice sharp with accusation. "Messing with his phone, looking around like he's watching people. Now he's been standing there for 10 minutes just tapping away." Darius stared at her, incredulous. Was she serious? "I was on my router settings," he said flatly, his patience wearing thin. "Because someone I don't know, has been using my Wi-Fi." Melanie scoffed, crossing her arms tighter. "Oh sure, and I'm supposed to believe that." Detective Navarro turned to her, his tone firm but measured. "Ma'am, do you have any evidence that Mr. Coleman has done something illegal?" Melanie hesitated, her confidence wavering. She didn't have proof, just a gut feeling. I don't know," she admitted reluctantly. "But I think you should check." Navarro exhaled sharply, his patience visibly fraying. He turned back to Darius. Sir, would you mind if we take a quick look at your router settings? Just to clear this up. Darius clenched his jaw. He shouldn't have to justify himself, but he also knew how these situations could escalate. Reluctantly, he unlocked his phone and pulled up the settings. Fine. Here, take a look. Navarro leaned in, scanning the list of connected devices. That's when his expression shifted. There it was. Crestwood IO1. Who owns that device? Navarro asked, pointing to the unfamiliar name. Darius shook his head. Not me, officer. Officer Carter stepped closer, eyebrows raised. So someone's been using your Wi-Fi without permission. Darius nodded. And I don't think they were just stealing internet. Look at the connection logs. It's been running non-stop. Navarro's posture stiffened. This wasn't some petty neighborhood squabble anymore. Something darker was at play. Melanie, still standing on her porch, suddenly looked uneasy. Wait, what do you mean, watching? Darius turned to her, his eyes cold. I mean someone has been spying. And they might not just be watching me, they could be watching all of us. Silence fell over the front yard. The weight of Darius's words hung heavy in the air. Melanie, who had been so certain she was in the right, now looked uncertain. Spying. That wasn't what she'd expected to hear. Navarro straightened up, his voice more serious now. All right, let's get inside. I want to see exactly what we're dealing with. Darius didn't argue. He led the officers into his house, frustration simmering beneath the surface. He hadn't done anything wrong, yet here he was, being treated like a suspect in his own home. Melanie hesitated before following them inside, unsure why but feeling compelled to stay. Once inside, Darius placed his phone on the dining table and mirrored the router settings onto his laptop screen. The device list appeared again. Crestwood IO1, still connected, still active. Officer Carter leaned in, scanning the details. Can you tell what kind of device this is? Darius clicked around, his fingers moving quickly. I can't tell exactly. He opened the activity logs and froze. Navarro noticed the change in his face immediately. What is it? Darius's throat went dry. It's been accessing camera feeds. The room went silent. Melanie blinked, confusion etched across her face. I don't understand. What camera feeds? Darius turned the laptop around so everyone could see. His stomach churned as he spoke. My home security cameras. Someone's been logging in and watching my live feeds. Carter's expression tightened. You're saying someone has been spying on you through your own security system. Darius exhaled sharply. That's exactly what I'm saying. But then his stomach dropped further. As he scrolled through the logs, he realized it wasn't just his cameras. His system had flagged multiple IP addresses, some belonging to his network, others linked to entirely different homes. Oh, this is bad, Darius murmured under his breath. Navarro leaned closer, his voice urgent. What do you mean? Darius tapped the screen, his finger trembling slightly. This isn't just about me. Whoever hacked into my system didn't stop there. They've accessed other networks too. Other houses, other cameras. A man changes his Wi-Fi password, and within minutes, his neighbor calls 911. What begins as a simple misunderstanding quickly spirals into a chilling discovery that shakes an entire neighborhood to its core. But the real shock comes when they uncover who's behind it, and how close to home the truth hits. Darius clicked through the logs on his laptop, his face pale as he processed what he was seeing. Whoever this is, he said, his voice tight with anger, they're not just watching me. They're watching other people in the neighborhood. Melanie took a step back, shaking her head in disbelief. No, that can't be right. Darius didn't respond. Instead, he clicked on another log entry, opening a new feed. A dimly lit hallway appeared on the screen, followed by a living room, then a bedroom. Melanie gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She didn't need him to say it, she recognized it immediately. It was her house. Oh my God, she whispered, sinking into a nearby chair, her hands trembling. That's my house. Navarro's voice cut through the tension like a knife. How the hell is this happening? Darius gritted his teeth, piecing together the likely scenario. If I had to guess, someone in the neighborhood set up a fake network, a Wi-Fi signal that looks legit. People unknowingly connect to it, thinking it's safe. Once they do, their devices get compromised. Carter's face darkened. You mean a man-in-the-middle attack? Darius nodded. Exactly. Melanie's voice shook as she spoke. So you're saying, someone's been what? Watching me, my family. Darius's eyes locked onto hers, unflinching. That's exactly what I'm saying. Melanie sank further into the chair, her face ashen. Navarro's jaw tightened. All right, we need to figure out who's behind this, and fast. But what none of them realized yet was that the person responsible was far closer than they could have imagined. Detective Navarro wasted no time. He pulled out his radio and called for cybercrime support. This is bigger than we thought, he muttered to Carter. If someone's running a surveillance network, they're not just invading privacy, they're committing a felony. Carter nodded, her expression grim. And if we don't stop them now, who knows how far they've already gone. Meanwhile, Darius remained seated at his laptop, digging deeper. Though he wasn't a professional hacker, he knew enough about network security to trace where the stolen data was being sent. As he opened the IP logs, his blood ran cold. Wait. This can't be right. Navarro looked up sharply. What? Darius turned the laptop screen toward them. The data isn't going to some random server. It's being sent to an address right here in the neighborhood. Melanie's eyes widened. You mean, someone close by is behind this? Darius nodded. It's coming from a house just a few doors down. Navarro's expression hardened. Can you pinpoint exactly which one? Darius worked quickly, cross-referencing connection timestamps with signal strength. Within minutes, he had a match, and his stomach dropped. He recognized the address instantly. So did Melanie. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's... Darius cut her off, his voice icy. That's Brandon's house. Brandon Foster, Carter clarified, glancing at Melanie. Your nephew, Brandon Foster, a 22-year-old college student who had moved in with Melanie a few months ago. Quiet, always glued to his computer, barely socializing with anyone, he'd seemed harmless. Now, suddenly, things were starting to make a terrifying kind of sense. Melanie's face went pale. No, that doesn't make any sense. Brandon isn't. He wouldn't. Carter stepped forward, her tone firm. We need to talk to him. Now. Melanie hesitated, torn between denial and a gnawing suspicion deep in her gut. Finally, she murmured, I'll take you to him. Darius stood abruptly. I'm coming too. Navarro shot him a sharp look. No, you stay here. Let us handle this. Darius clenched his jaw, frustration simmering beneath the surface. He hated sitting back when he was the one who had uncovered everything, but he also knew pushing back wouldn't help. Fine, he muttered, but you'd better get the truth out of him. The truth, however, was even worse than they imagined. Melanie's hands trembled as she led Navarro and Carter down the street toward her house. Each step felt heavier than the last. Brandon, the kid she had taken in, the one she'd helped through school, it couldn't be him. And yet, deep down, a voice in her head whispered otherwise. A man changes his Wi-Fi password, and within minutes, his neighbor calls 911. What starts as a petty misunderstanding quickly spirals into a chilling revelation that shakes an entire neighborhood, and exposes the dangers of jumping to conclusions. But the real twist, the truth hits far closer to home than anyone could have imagined. Melanie's voice trembled as she opened the front door, calling out nervously, Brandon. Can you come downstairs for a minute? Silence greeted her. Navarro exchanged a glance with Carter before stepping inside. We're going up, he said firmly. Melanie didn't argue. She just wrapped her arms around herself, her breath uneven, as they climbed the stairs toward Brandon's bedroom. The door was shut, no sounds coming from within. Navarro knocked hard. Brandon, this is the police. We need to talk. Still nothing. Then, faintly, the sound of movement, a chair scraping, footsteps approaching. Carter's hand hovered over her gun as Navarro turned the knob. The door creaked open, revealing Brandon Foster. He looked startled, his nervous eyes darting between Navarro, Carter, and his aunt. His hands fidgeted at his sides. What's going on? He asked, his voice tight. Navarro studied him closely. We have reason to believe you've been accessing private security cameras in the neighborhood. Care to explain that? Brandon's face barely flinched, but his fingers curled slightly, like he was gripping something invisible. What? That's crazy, he scoffed. I don't know what you're talking about. Carter wasn't buying it. Mind if we check your laptop? His jaw tightened. You don't have a warrant. Navarro stepped closer, his tone sharp. Brandon, we can get one. But right now, we're giving you a chance to tell us the truth before this gets worse. A long, tense beat passed. Finally, Brandon exhaled, running a hand through his hair. Look, I wasn't doing anything illegal, okay? Navarro cut him off. Then why is your IP address linked to a network breach involving multiple homes? Brandon froze. Melanie's voice cracked as she spoke. Brandon, please tell me you're not involved in this. His eyes darted to her, and for the first time, his mask cracked. I didn't mean for it to get this far, he muttered. It started as a joke. I wanted to see if I could get into someone's Wi-Fi, just to mess with them. Navarro's voice hardened. So you admit you hacked into the network? Brandon hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Melanie's breath caught in her throat. It was just supposed to be a prank, Brandon continued, his voice speeding up. But then I saw the security cameras, and I got curious. Carter's eyes narrowed. Curious? Or obsessed? Brandon didn't answer. Navarro's patience ran out. How many people have you watched? Silence. Then his voice dropped. I don't know. Melanie staggered back, tears welling in her eyes. Oh my God. For the first time, real regret crossed Brandon's face. I swear, I wasn't hurting anyone, he said. Navarro didn't let him finish. Brandon Foster, you're under arrest for unauthorized access of a computer network and unlawful surveillance. Brandon went pale. Wait, no. Carter was already pulling out her cuffs. Melanie turned away, covering her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. Darius had been right all along, and the worst part, she had called the cops on him when the real danger had been inside her house the whole time. But this wasn't over yet. Brandon didn't resist. He stood there, wrists bound in cuffs, staring at the floor as Navarro read him his rights. It was over. Melanie's breath was shaky. She couldn't even look at him. This was her nephew, the boy she had taken in, fed, supported, and he had been violating the privacy of their entire neighborhood. As Navarro guided Brandon toward the door, he paused and turned to Darius, who had been watching silently from the sidewalk. You were right, Navarro admitted. If you hadn't caught this, we might have never known. Darius didn't say anything at first. He just let out a slow breath, looking between Brandon and Melanie. Finally, he spoke, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. You know what's crazy? He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I was out here minding my own business, changing my own Wi-Fi password, and yet somehow I was the one who got the cops called on me. Melanie flinched. She had no defense because there was none. I was wrong, she murmured. I made an assumption, and it was completely unfair. Darius let that sit in the air for a moment. Then, shaking his head, he turned toward his house. I don't need an apology, he said over his shoulder. Just do better. And with that, he went inside. Navarro and Carter exchanged a look before leading Brandon toward the patrol car. Melanie stayed behind, standing alone in the middle of the street. The truth had been right in front of her all along, but she had been too busy looking at the wrong person. And that mistake, it would haunt her for a long, long time. Assumptions have consequences. Jumping to conclusions based on bias or paranoia can ruin innocent people's lives while the real danger goes unchecked. Instead of making judgments without evidence, take a step back. Observe. Listen. The truth might not be what you expect. If you found this story opening, share it. You never know who needs to hear this lesson today.